Islam claims historicity.
What does that mean? Sorry, historicity.
It claims that, for example, in the Quran it says Jesus was a Muslim and the apostles were Muslims.
Yeah.
Now, we know Jesus lived in the reign of the Emperor Augustus, born in the reign of the Emperor Augustus, died in the reign of the Emperor Tiberius, Augustus' successor. So that places Jesus' birth and death, life and death, in historical time.
Okay.
Right? Now, if Muslims say Jesus was a Muslim and the apostles were Muslims, they're saying that when Jesus preached, he taught Islam, and when the apostles taught, they taught Islam.
Yeah.
Islam also says that Jesus did not die on the cross.
Yeah.
So that means those who claimed he died on the cross were wrong, and those who claimed he rose from the dead are wrong. So these are clear historical claims, right? So they can be tested. When you look at all the documents that come down to us from the time of Jesus or after his death, or after his alleged death, that's the 1st century. Then documents from the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, up to before Muhammad was born.
Yeah.
You find there's a lot of documents. Now, they all teach early Catholicism, that it was early versions of my religion, or you get teachers, writers, condemning what we call heresies. So those who held views contrary to that early Catholic teaching. Now, whether they're heretics or not is not the point. They're written about in these writings. But there's no writing that comes down to us from these early Muslims who apparently lived at the time of Jesus and after him. And there's no reference in the early Catholic writings to those who the Catholics would call heretical people, the Muslims who say Jesus didn't die on the cross or he didn't rise from the dead. Mark my words, the early Catholics were condemning people left, right and centre. They never mentioned these characters.
In the Quran it says they put him on the cross, so to some people it looked like Jesus on the cross, but it wasn't him.
Yeah, they did.
So some people might have thought that was actually him.
Yeah. But the true followers of Jesus would have said he didn't rise from the dead. He didn't die on the cross. We didn't put him in the tomb. He wasn't really crucified, and he didn't rise from the dead. The true apostles would say that because they were Muslims, right?
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that.
And they would have taught others that truth.
But you're saying there's no recollection of that?
I'm saying there's not a single document in existence that refers to any religion that says that.
But you see the earliest Christians, I can't remember their name. For the life of me, it's
Ebionites.
lost me. No, not them. If you say me the name, I'll remember. I think it begins with C. But I think that...
Nazarenes?
The Nazarenes, I think you're right.
But they're like Ebionites.
They don't believe that Christ was, if I'm not mistaken.
No, these held a view. We've only know them through the early church fathers.
Okay.
And these guys, Nazarenes and Ebionites, celebrated the resurrection of Christ. So obviously if you're celebrating the resurrection of Christ, you read Eusebius of Caesarea, his ecclesiastical history. I think it's Hegesippus that quotes these people.
Okay.
And Eusebius quotes Hegesippus.
Right.
And you get this teaching, this is what you get about them. They weren't early Muslims. And many of them, and they believed, some of these guys didn't believe Mary miraculously conceived Jesus.
Okay.
But the Quran says she did.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
So they're not Muslims, so we need another early Christian group to show that there were early Muslims, as the Quran suggests.
Well, I believe that in regards to when they say they're Muslim, they're also talking about the message of what Jesus came with. And the message that Jesus came with was the same as all the rest of the prophets that came before him.
Now, we've got to not presume that to start with. We're looking for historical evidence.
Okay, so if I look at historical evidence, the prophets of the Old Testament, they came, my thing is this, they had different names, they died at different times, but in regards to who they worshipped, it was all the same God.
Okay.
Jesus' message, I think, was the same as their message.
Now, when you say you think, we've got to stop there, haven't we? Because when you talk about the prophets, we've got the Old Testament documents.
That's correct, yeah.
Now, I know Muslim people dispute lots of the stuff in there, but we'll put that to one side.
Yeah.
So we can say we accept the Old Testament prophets.
Yes.
What I'm talking about, I'm focusing on who Jesus was, and what his followers taught about him, and what he taught. And all I'm saying is,
talk about that.
So I'm saying that whether Jesus taught what the Old Testament prophets taught is the issue.
I believe it's the same.
Yeah, and we can only know that though from whatever documents existed at the time of Jesus or after he passed on to the next life.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that Jesus, there's no evidence that Jesus or the apostles taught a version of Islam which was different from my Catholic faith. The evidence from the early documents is that the early Christians taught either the Catholic teaching that Jesus is God and that he died on the cross and that he rose from the dead, or here's what the alternative. Yes, they would teach that he died on the cross and rose from the dead, but they might say, he's a being, a godlike being, a super being. Because there's a religion called Gnosticism.
Gnosticism.
Yeah, and that taught a doctrine of emanations. So you have the high gods, the supreme gods, and various gods emanate from him. And they come down to different levels. It's bizarre, I know, it's bizarre. But they would say that Jesus is a high emanation, right? Not a human being. So what I'm saying is there's a range of beliefs in what we call the heretics.
Right.
Between Jesus being the full God, absolutely God, or an emanation, a super being of some sort, an angelic being. So therefore, these heretics aren't teaching he's just a man. The Jews did. They said, he's just a man.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. The Jews are saying, we crucified him, he's just a man. Of course, they're saying that. But when you get away from those who just rejected him totally, all the early writers are saying he's either a super being or he's God or something in between. And that he did die on the cross anyway and rose from the dead. Oh, actually, in terms of dying on the cross, some of them say, there's a group, I think they're the Apollinarians, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
He's on the cross, he's crucified, and he's laughing at them, the Romans and the Jews. He's laughing at them because there's a doctrine, it's called Docetism, I think, that he's God with the appearance of a human body. That's their creed, right? I'm sorry to cause you to furrow your brow, it's just there's a bizarre range of beliefs.
Yeah, I understand.
And this is one of them.
But what do you believe?
Oh, I'm a Catholic.
So you
I believe
that he's God reincarnate?
Yes, but you know the reason I was talking to you like I was, and not going to what I believe, because frankly it doesn't matter what I believe, except for me and my position with God.
So you want to spread your message.
But there is another point though. I'm just me. I can be wrong. Anybody can be wrong or right. So what I wanted to do was to say, look, apart from what I believe, which could be junk or could be true, let's look at the evidence for what I believe. And my point was that Catholicism, all the core teachings of the Catholic Church are there in those early Christian writings. There's none for Islam and there's precious little for Protestantism.
But let me
because that's the alternative Christian faith in the park elsewhere.
I'm not too sure what the Protestants believe in. I know that there's a lot of friction.
It's very similar to us, but there's friction.
Yeah, I know in Ireland I think there was a lot of friction between the Protestants.
You don't say.
I think there was a lot. I'm not too sure about the whole everything.